The Sarathian royal court was famous across the galaxy. Tall golden pillars reached up toward a ceiling that shimmered like starlight. The throne of Emperor Caloran stood at the far end, raised high above the long silver floor. Beside him sat his daughter, Princess Elira, known for her sharp tongue and quick laughter. Nobles and scholars gathered along the sides, whispering, their long cloaks brushing the polished ground. On this day, the humans had been invited. They came as part of the new peace talks. The Sarathians ruled many star systems, but Earth's people were newcomers to the Great Alliance. Many aliens did not yet respect them. To most of the court, humans were seen as weak, too simple and too young to matter in a galaxy filled with mighty empires. At the front of the human group stood their envoy, Ambassador Rian, a man with calm eyes and a steady voice. He wore no crown or shining jewels, only a simple blue robe with Earth's crest on the chest. Behind him stood a guard, Darren, a human soldier in plain armor. He carried no weapon, only a duty to protect his envoy. The Sarathian court studied the humans with interest. Some hid their laughter behind their hands, others whispered openly. They saw no reason to take the newcomers seriously. And then the princess spoke. "Is this it?" Princess Elira's voice echoed through the hall. She leaned forward from her seat, her long silver hair flowing down her shoulders. "Are these the humans? The small ones I have heard so much about? I thought they would at least look different." Ripple of laughter spread through the nobles. Their jeweled robes rustled as they leaned closer to watch. Ambassador Ryan bowed respectfully. "We thank the Empire for allowing us to speak in this great hall. We come with hopes of—" But Elira raised a hand, cutting him off. Her eyes fixed not on the ambassador, but on Darren, who stood silently behind him. "And who is this?" she asked. Her lips curved in a smile that was not kind. "A soldier? He looks more like a servant. Tell me, human soldier, are you here to protect your leader with those small hands?" The court erupted in laughter again. Some nobles clapped their hands together as if enjoying a play. Others whispered jokes about how easily such a soldier would break in battle. Darren did not move. His face remained calm, his eyes forward. He bowed slightly, saying nothing. Elira tilted her head. "Oh? He does not answer? Perhaps he cannot speak, or perhaps he is afraid." The laughter grew louder, echoing against the golden pillars. Ambassador Rian turned his head slightly, as if to check on Darren, but Darren's calm expression reassured him. The soldier stood like a stone, unshaken by the words that fell around him like arrows. The Emperor raised his hand, and the hall grew quiet. His deep voice filled the chamber. "Daughter, enough. The humans are guests." Elira bowed her head, but her eyes still lingered on Darren. She had never seen a human before. She had imagined them to be noisy, desperate to prove themselves. Yet this one did not react, even when mocked before 100 nobles. The talks continued. Ambassador Rian spoke of trade routes and cultural exchange. He offered gifts of art, music, and knowledge from Earth. The nobles listened, some politely, others with hidden smirks. To them, the humans' offerings seemed small compared to the riches of the Empire. Yet while the words filled the hall, Elira's gaze kept drifting back to Darren. She tried again and again to provoke him with small remarks. "Does he ever move?" she asked loudly at one point. "Perhaps he is a statue the humans brought to impress us," said another noble, earning another round of laughter. Still, Darren did not answer. His silence was not from fear, but from choice. He stood tall, steady, and respectful. When the meeting ended, the humans were allowed to leave. As they walked down the long silver floor, the sound of Sarathian laughter still echoed in the air. Outside the court, under the open sky of the capital world, Ambassador Rian turned to his guard. "You handled yourself well, Darren. Most men would have answered back, but you said nothing." Darren gave a small smile. "Words would only add fire, sir. My duty is not to fight pride with pride. My duty is to protect you." Ryan nodded. "And yet, I believe your silence spoke louder than any words." High above, on the palace balcony, Princess Elira watched them leave. Her smile had faded. For the first time, she felt a strange unease. She had mocked the human soldier, but his calm had unsettled her more than anger would have. She whispered, to herself, "Strange, very strange. Humans are not what I expected." And so, while the nobles laughed, a seed of curiosity had been planted in the princess's heart. It was a seed that would grow in the days to come, changing her view of humanity forever. The sun of the Sarathian capital world rose slowly over the tall crystal towers, filling the city with soft light. The humans stayed in a guest wing of the royal palace, a place usually reserved for honored visitors. It was wide and beautiful, with smooth white walls and gardens filled with silver-leafed trees. Inside the halls, Ambassador Rian walked with steady steps, reviewing the notes for the next council meeting. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed concern. The first day in the Sarathian court had not gone well. The princess's mocking words still echoed in the minds of many. "They see us as weak," he said quietly. "They laugh at us instead of listening." Behind him, Darren walked silently, his armor gleaming faintly in the light. He carried himself with ease, his eyes always moving, scanning every corner as if danger could appear at any moment. "They laugh because they do not understand us," Darren answered finally. His tone was even, without bitterness. "One day they will." Ryan looked at him, studying the soldier's calm expression. "You said nothing yesterday even when they mocked. Why?" Darren paused by one of the garden windows. Outside, birds with bright golden wings flew among the silver branches. He watched them before replying. If I had answered, they would have seen anger. If I had argued, they would have seen pride. But silence makes them wonder. They do not know what lies behind it." Ryan gave a small smile. "You may be a soldier, but you think like a teacher." Darren only bowed slightly, then returned to his watchful stance. Later that day, the humans were called again to the great hall. The nobles were already waiting, dressed in rich robes of blue and green, their long jeweled staffs tapping against the floor as they talked among themselves. The princess sat beside her father, her silver hair shining like a river under the light. Her eyes immediately found Darren as the humans entered. When Ambassador Rian began to speak of Earth's trade, offers, Elira leaned closer to her attendants and whispered loudly enough for the court to hear. "Look, the statue returns. Perhaps we should place him in the gardens. He would make a fine decoration among the trees." The nobles burst into laughter again. Some covered their mouths politely, but others laughed openly. The sound rolled across the hall like a wave. Still, Darren stood silent. His eyes did not meet theirs. He kept his gaze on the ambassador, as if the mocking voices did not even exist. Elira narrowed her eyes. She expected him to break. She expected him to flush with anger, or at least show hurt. But his calmness was like a wall, smooth and strong. It made her words feel smaller, as if they bounced back at her instead of striking him. The Emperor finally spoke, his deep voice filling the space. "Daughter, enough! Let us hear the humans." Ryan continued his speech, describing Earth's willingness to share technology for farming, medicine, and star mapping. But even as he spoke, he noticed something strange. Some Sarathian nobles were no longer watching him. Their eyes kept drifting to Darren, as if curious about the soldier's quiet strength. After the council ended, the humans were invited to a small gathering in the palace gardens. The nobles strolled among the silver trees, sipping from crystal cups filled with glowing fruit juice. Darren stood near the edge of the gathering, his hands behind his back. A few young Sarathian nobles approached him, smirking. "Human soldier," one said, "but tell us, how do you fight without claws or wings? Do you scratch your enemies with those tiny hands?" The others laughed. Darren looked at them calmly. "We fight with what we have. Not always with weapons, sometimes with patience." The nobles frowned. They expected him to be angry, but instead, his words were soft and steady. One of them tilted his head. "Patience? That is no weapon." "Perhaps," Darren said, "but patience can win where anger loses." The nobles exchanged looks, unsure how to answer. Slowly they drifted away, muttering to themselves. From the balcony above, Princess Elira had been watching. She tapped her fingers against the railing, frustrated. No matter how much she mocked, no matter how many laughed, the human soldier refused to be shaken. It was as if he carried an invisible shield, one not made of metal, but of something deeper. That night, the human envoy gathered in their guest hall. Ryan sat with his advisors, speaking quietly of the day's events. "They will not take us." "Seriously," one advisor said. "We are wasting our time here. The Sarathians only laugh." Ryan shook his head. "Not all of them. I saw some of the nobles today. They were curious. Something has changed." His eyes moved to Darren, who stood near the doorway, silent as always. "They laughed at him," the advisor said. "Yet, they could not break him." "Yes," Ryan agreed. Sometimes the strongest answer is not with words. Darren looked out the window, where the twin moons of the capital world rose into the night sky. Mockery is like the wind. It can be loud, but it passes. What remains is how we stand against it. The envoy grew quiet. For a moment, they all felt a strange strength from his calm presence. In her royal chambers, Elira paced back and forth. She could not rest. Why had the human soldier's silence bothered her so much? She had mocked many species before. Most shouted back or tried to prove themselves. It always made her laugh. But this human did not play her game. She stopped at the window, staring at the distant stars. "Why does he not answer me? Why does his silence feel heavier than my words?" Her question had no answer yet. But deep inside, she felt the first stirrings of curiosity. The princess who once laughed at humans now found herself thinking of them, thinking of the quiet soldier who stood like stone in a hall of laughter. The Sarathian capital glittered like a jewel in the darkness of space. Thousands of ships moved in and out of its orbit every day, carrying goods, travelers, and officials from across the empire. It was said no danger could ever touch the heart of Sarathian power. But danger often came when least expected. It was on the third day of the peace talks when the alarm rang through the palace. A long, sharp tone echoed across the marble halls. Guards ran to their posts. The nobles looked up in shock, their jeweled cloaks swaying as they whispered nervously. Ambassador Rion and the human envoys were in a meeting room when the alarm blared. Darren was the first to react. His hand went to the communicator on his wrist. "What is happening?" Ryan asked, rising from his seat. A palace guard rushed in, his silver armor shining with panic. "Raiders! They struck the supply station near orbit. Several ships are damaged." The defenses were caught off guard. The envoy exchanged worried looks. The Sarathian Empire was powerful, but raider attacks were sudden and unpredictable. Most nobles had never faced such danger directly. "Stay inside," the guard ordered. "The palace is secure," but Darren stepped forward. "Where is the nearest command center?" The guard blinked. "Why do you ask, human? This is not your battle." "Danger does not care whose battle it is," Darren replied calmly. His eyes were steady. "Show me the way." Minutes later, Darren and Ryan followed the guard to a chamber filled with glowing screens. Sarathian officers hurried back and forth, shouting reports. A large display showed the orbital station, smoke and fire spilling into the void as small raider ships circled it like insects. "The raiders cut off our supply line," one officer said. "They're jamming our signals. Our patrol ships are scattered." Another officer slammed his hand against the console. "We must wait for reinforcements." "Wait?" Darren asked quietly. He stepped closer to the display. "By then, the station will be lost, and everyone on it." The officers turned toward him, surprised. A few sneered at the idea of a human speaking in their command room. But Emperor Kaloran had entered silently behind them, and with him came Princess Aelira. "Let him speak," the Emperor said, his deep voice carrying authority. The officers bowed, falling silent. Darren studied the screen carefully. He traced the raiders' movements with his finger. "They're circling too close," he explained. "If we send one fast unit through here," he pointed to a narrow gap, "we can cut their formation. Then use the station's own defense guns to trap them against the debris." The officers frowned. "That is reckless. Too dangerous." "Perhaps," Darren said. "But simple plans can work when enemies are careless. Raiders rely on fear. Break their rhythm, and they will scatter." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then the Emperor gave a small nod. "Do it!" The officers hesitated, but they could not disobey. Orders were sent at once. High above the capital, Sarathian pilots launched their swiftest craft following the humans' plan. Darren stood in the command room, his hands behind his back, his face calm. Princess Aelira could not look away from him. On the screens, the small Sarathian ship darted into the narrow gap exactly as Darren described. The raiders were caught off guard. Their formation broke, and in their confusion, the station's defense. Guns fired, striking 2 raider ships and forcing the rest to retreat. The officers gasped. The nobles watching through the side windows whispered in disbelief. It worked," one officer murmured. The Emperor nodded slowly. "Simple, but effective." Darren only bowed his head slightly. "The pilots did their duty well." Later, when the danger had passed, the humans were escorted back to their guest hall. The nobles whispered behind their hands as they watched. Darren walked past. For the first time, their laughter was gone. There was only curiosity, and perhaps a little respect. That evening, a banquet was held in the palace dining hall to calm the shaken court. Silver torches glowed along the walls, and music filled the air. The nobles gathered once again, but their voices carried a different tone. They spoke of the human soldier, the one who had offered a plan when Cerathian officers hesitated. Princess Alyra sat silently at the long table. Her food remained untouched. She remembered how she had mocked Darren only days before. She remembered calling him a statue. Yet today, that statue had moved when her own people froze. She finally turned her gaze toward him. Darren was standing near the edge of the hall, as always, his posture steady and quiet. He was not boasting. He was not telling stories of his cleverness. He stood like a guard, watching, silent as stone. Alyra leaned closer to her father. "He does not even claim credit," she whispered. The Emperor studied the human soldier as well. "True strength," he said softly, "needs no trumpet." When the banquet ended, Alyra found herself walking alone in the palace garden. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of silver leaves. She stopped near a fountain and looked at the reflection of the twin moons on the water. Her thoughts were restless. For as long as she remembered, she had believed humans to be weak, nothing more than newcomers to the galaxy's great stage. Yet today had shown her something different. Darren's plan had saved lives. His calm had steadied the command room, and his silence, once so frustrating, now seemed to hold a strength she could not explain. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned and saw Darren walking past, perhaps on his way back to the guest hall. She called out before she could stop herself. "Soldier." Darren paused and looked at her with calm eyes. Alyra crossed her arms, hiding her unease. "You surprised me today." He bowed slightly. "I only did what was needed, Princess." Her lips pressed together. "Most would have shouted for glory, but you—" She shook her head. "You are difficult to understand." Darren gave the faintest of smiles. "Sometimes, Princess, what is hardest to understand is what lasts the longest." With that, he bowed again and continued walking, leaving her staring after him, her heart strangely unsettled. For the first time in her life, Princess Alyra wondered if perhaps humanity was not so weak after all. The palace was quiet after the raid. Life in the capital returned to its usual rhythm of trade meetings, music, and shining parades, but the memory of the attack still lingered. Whispers of the human soldier spread through the halls like drifting smoke. Some nobles scoffed, refusing to believe the story. Others admitted, in hushed tones, that the humans' plan had saved lives. Princess Alyra could not forget. She sat in her chamber, staring at the silver curtains that swayed gently in the breeze. Her mind returned again and again to the image of Darren standing calmly in the command room, his voice steady, while seasoned Cerathian officers faltered. She tapped her fingers on the arm of her chair. "Why does he unsettle me?" she whispered. Finally, she made her decision. If the human soldier's strength came not from weapons or power, then she would test him herself. That evening, Alyra sent a messenger to the human guest hall. "The princess commands the presence of the soldier," the messenger said, bowing stiffly. Darren, who had just finished checking the security doors, looked at Ambassador Ryan. The envoy gave a slow nod. "Go, but be careful with your words." Darren bowed and followed the messenger through the wide palace corridors. Silver lamps glowed along the walls, casting soft light across the polished floors. Finally, he was led into Elira's private chamber. The room was large but quiet, filled with bookshelves, maps of star systems, and windows that opened to the glowing city. Elira sat near a low table, her long silver hair falling over her shoulders. Her expression was cool, but her eyes watched him carefully. "You may stand there," she said, pointing to a spot near the table. Darren obeyed, bowing slightly. For a long moment, Elira said nothing. She studied him the way a scholar studies, a puzzle. Then she finally spoke. "Human soldier, you are different from the others I have mocked before. When I insulted you, you did not rise to defend yourself. When I tested you with laughter, you did not break. And when danger struck, you acted while my own people hesitated." "Why?" Darren answered calmly. "Because my duty is clear, Princess. I serve my people. I do not serve pride or anger." Her eyes narrowed. "You mean to say that mockery does not wound you?" "It is only words," he replied. "They do not change who I am." Elira leaned forward. "Most species crave respect. They fight for honor. But you accept insult and remain calm. Is that weakness? Or is it strength?" Darren's gaze remained steady. "Strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is in silence. Sometimes it is in patience. Sometimes it is in standing firm when others expect you to fall." Her heart stirred at his words, though she hid it, behind a raised chin. "And yet you are human. Your race is young in the stars. What gives you the right to speak of strength before an empire older than your entire history?" Darren did not flinch. "Because strength is not measured by age. It is measured by what one endures. Humanity has endured much. We have no great fleets, no ancient thrones. But we survive. We rise again after every fall. That is our way." Elira was silent. His words pressed against her pride, yet she could not dismiss them. She rose from her chair and walked slowly around him, circling like a predator testing its prey. "Tell me, soldier," she said at last, "what do you value most? If not honor, if not glory, then what drives you?" Darren looked out the window, where the twin moons glowed above the towers. His voice was soft, but firm. "Family. It is family that makes us strong. The bond between mother and child, father and son, friend and friend. That bond cannot be broken, even by empires. It is what gives us courage when we have nothing else." The princess froze. The word family felt heavy in her chest. In the empire, family ties had grown weak. Nobles lived for power, alliances, and pride. The idea that strength could come from something so simple unsettled her deeply. She turned away, hiding her face. "You speak as if such bonds are greater than armies." "They are," Darren said quietly. "Armies fade, thrones fall. But the bond of family passes from one generation to the next. That is what endures." Elira clenched her hands. She wanted to argue, to laugh at his simple human belief. Yet the memory of the command room returned, the way his calmness had steadied others, the way his plan had saved lives. Perhaps his words were not so simple after all. The silence stretched. Finally, Elira faced him again. "You are a strange man, Darren. Strange and perhaps dangerous. You speak of family as if it is a weapon." Darren gave the faintest of smiles. Not a weapon, a shield. Her eyes flickered with something she did not want to name. Respect, perhaps. Or curiosity. You may go, she said suddenly, turning away. I have heard enough for now. Darren bowed. As you wish, Princess. As he left the chamber, Alara pressed her hand against her heart. It was beating too quickly, she told. Herself, it was anger. Nothing more. But deep inside, she knew it was something else. Something she could not yet admit. Later that night, Alara sat alone in her chamber, staring at the stars. She thought of her empire, built on power and pride. She thought of the human soldier, who spoke of strength not in crowns or weapons, but in patience and family, and for the first time in her life she wondered if perhaps her people had lost something important long ago. The laughter she once used so easily now felt far away. In its place was a quiet question, echoing in her heart. Could the humans be stronger than we believe? Not because of power, but because of the bonds we have. Forgotten? The palace was alive with music on the morning the new guest arrived. A soft chime echoed through the halls, announcing the approach of the human envoy leader. The Sarathian nobles gathered quickly, curious to see what kind of commander Earth had sent. Most expected a general with medals, a scientist with advanced devices, or perhaps a stern diplomat with clever words. Instead, the great silver doors opened, and a woman stepped inside. She was not young, yet her face carried a calm beauty. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and her eyes were gentle but firm. She wore a simple robe, not filled with jewels, but embroidered with Earth's crest. She walked slowly but confidently, as if she feared nothing in the grand hall. This, Ambassador Ryan announced with pride, is Mira, who speaks for Earth today. The nobles murmured in surprise. Some raised their brows in disbelief. A woman? A motherly figure with no crown, no armor? To them, it seemed almost laughable. Princess Alara leaned forward in her seat, watching closely. Something about this woman's presence unsettled her. Mira bowed gracefully before the Emperor. I thank the Sarathian Empire for welcoming us. We come not to boast of strength, but to share friendship. Her voice was soft, yet it carried through the vast hall. The Emperor studied her with interest. You are not a warrior, nor a ruler. Why do the humans send you to speak for them? Mira smiled gently. Because I am both less and more. I am a mother, and mothers carry the voice of generations. A silence fell over the hall. Nobles exchanged uncertain looks. Some whispered, some frowned, but no one laughed. There was something in her words that felt heavier than expected. As the council began, Mira spoke with warmth and patience. She told stories of Earth, not of wars or weapons, but of families who rebuilt after storms, of communities who shared when they had little, of parents who sacrificed for their children. Strength, she said, is not only found in steel or fire. Strength is in the bond between people. It is in love that endures across time. Empires rise and fall, but family remains. That is what makes us human. The nobles listened. Some tried to scoff, but their voices were weak. Her words reminded them of something they had forgotten long ago. Princess Alara shifted in her seat. She tried to dismiss the woman's speech, telling herself it was just simple talk from a simple race. But deep inside, she felt the truth of it pressing against her heart. Her empire had grown proud, so proud that family bonds were often ignored. Parents sent children to tutors. Nobles married for power, not love. The empire had riches and armies. But when Mira spoke, Aelira realized how empty that power could feel. During the break, Mira was invited to walk in the palace gardens. The nobles followed, curious, though they kept their distance. Darren walked, beside his mother silently, his calm presence unchanged. Aelira, however, approached them directly. Her silver gown shimmered under the light as she stepped closer. "So," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "the humans send a mother to speak for them. Do you truly believe your soft words can change an empire?" Mira looked at the princess with gentle eyes. "I believe words carry power when they come from the heart. Do you not agree, princess?" Aelira frowned. She had expected fear or defense, but not kindness. "Power," she said, "comes from armies, from control, not from families sitting by firesides." Mira smiled faintly. "And yet, princess, where does every army come from? Where does every ruler come from? From families. Even you were once a child in your mother's arms. Was she not your first teacher of strength?" The words struck Aelira like an arrow. She opened her mouth to reply, but no sound came. For a moment she remembered her own mother, long gone. She remembered soft hands, gentle voices, memories buried beneath years of pride. She turned away quickly. "You speak simply," she said, though her voice was less sharp now. "Sometimes," Mira answered softly, "the simplest truths are the strongest." That evening, the emperor held a private gathering with Mira, Rian, and a few nobles. The hall was smaller, the light softer. Food was set upon silver trays, but most were too busy listening to Mira's words to eat. She spoke not as a ruler, but as a mother telling stories. She described families on Earth sharing meals after long work, children learning from grandparents, and neighbors helping one another in times of need. When she finished, silence filled the hall. Even the emperor leaned back in thought. Finally, he said, "Your people are strange, Mira of Earth. You do not measure greatness in crowns or fleets. You measure it in bonds unseen. It is curious." Mira bowed her head. "We are not the strongest, nor the oldest, but we are not so small as others think. What binds us cannot be mocked away." Aelira sat quietly at the edge of the gathering. She did not mock this time. She only listened. Later, in the quiet of her chamber, Aelira stood before her mirror. She stared at her own reflection, her silver hair falling around her proud face. She remembered Mira's words, and Darren's before her. Strength is in family. Bonds are shields that do not break. She pressed a hand against her chest. Why did these humans, with no fleets or crowns, stir something inside her that her own empire never had? She whispered softly, almost to herself. Could it be true? Could their strength come from something we lost? The stars outside shone brightly, but for the first time, Princess Aelira did not feel taller than them. She felt small, thoughtful, and strangely humbled. And though she would not admit it aloud, she was beginning to see humans in a new light, not as weak but as keepers of something powerful and timeless. The grand hall of the Sarathian Council was larger than any chamber Darren had seen. Golden pillars stretched toward the ceiling, and banners of the empire fluttered lightly in the soft wind from the open windows. Nobles gathered in rows, their jeweled cloaks swaying as they whispered and glanced at the humans. Princess Aelira sat beside her father, her expression cautious but alert. She had witnessed Darren's calm strength and her mother's quiet wisdom, and now she wondered what more the humans could show her. At the head of the hall, Mira stepped forward. Her dark eyes swept across the audience, calm and steady. She carried nothing but herself. Yet the room seemed to grow silent as she spoke. "Honored leaders of the Sarathian Empire," Mira began, "you have seen my people arrive as guests. You have heard our words and witnessed our actions. But there is more to humanity than what you have seen." The nobles whispered among themselves, curious. Many had expected small gifts, polite words, and perhaps technical knowledge. Instead, Mira spoke of something deeper, something unseen. "What I bring today," she continued, "is not technology, not power, not weapons. I bring what you might call the father bomb." The room froze. Even the guards lowered their eyes. None had heard such words before. "Father bomb?" one noble asked, his voice trembling. Mira nodded. "It is not a weapon of destruction. It is a revelation. It is the power of human legacy, the inheritance of family, the knowledge and love passed from parent to child through generations. It is a force that cannot be destroyed, mocked, or erased by armies." Some nobles frowned. Others whispered nervously. Princess Aelira's eyes widened. She felt her chest tighten. This was not what she expected. Mira walked slowly toward the center of the hall. "Consider this. An empire can rise through conquest. A fleet can dominate planets. Thrones can command subjects. But families teach, guide, and protect. Fathers and mothers shape the future without ever claiming glory. That is our strength." She paused, letting her words sink in. The silence in the room was heavy. Even the most arrogant nobles could not laugh or dismiss what she said. Darren watched quietly at the edge of the hall. He stood straight, silent, as always, but his mother's words seemed to flow through him as well. Princess Aelira studied him. She noticed that even now, he did not boast. He did not claim credit. He only stood as proof of what Mira was saying. Mira continued, "Our fathers and mothers passed down knowledge, courage, and values. Children learn not only skills, but character. Communities survive because people care for one another. That is our weapon. That is our shield. And it is stronger than any fleet or army, because it cannot be destroyed by fire, or erased by time, or silenced by pride." A murmur ran through the nobles. Some shifted in their seats. They had thought themselves above such simple ideas, but the quiet power of Mira's words was undeniable. Princess Aelira clenched her hands. She remembered the raid, Darren's calm actions, the way humans never claimed glory yet acted with purpose. And now her mother spoke of generations, bonds, and legacy. Something her empire had abandoned long ago. Mira raised her hand slightly, drawing attention back to her words. "You may mock us. You may call us weak. But what cannot be mocked is what we pass from one generation to the next. Fathers teach sons. Mothers guide daughters. Knowledge is shared. Wisdom is carried. Love is given freely. That is humanity's father bomb, a force that grows quietly, spreads widely, and endures longer than any empire. She looked directly at Princess Elira. Do you understand, Princess? You have laughed at my son. You have judged his people. But what you see as small, fragile, or weak is what endures. Not ships, not weapons, not crowns, but love, courage, and guidance passed through families. The princess looked down at her hands. She felt a strange weight in her chest. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps she had underestimated humans, not because they lacked strength, but because she had never understood it. The Emperor spoke next, his voice steady. Mira of Earth, your words are unusual, but they carry truth. We see humans act differently than we imagined. We see courage, patience, and calm where we expected fear. Perhaps there is more to your people than we understood. Mira nodded. Indeed, Your Majesty. And we ask only to share, to cooperate, and to show that strength comes in many forms. One does not need to rule all planets to leave a mark on the galaxy. One only needs to raise children, teach them well, and guide them to act with courage. Even the nobles whispered among themselves. They were beginning to realize that what they had mocked was not weakness. It was an unseen, quiet, and powerful strength. Princess Elira remained silent. She did not speak, but her thoughts swirled. She thought of Darren, standing tall while others faltered. She thought of the calm, quiet strength in humans she had ignored. And she thought of her empire, which had relied on pride and power, yet had never taught the value of bonds and love as a force. For the first time, she felt admiration and unease. After the council, the humans were escorted back to their guest hall. The nobles were subdued, their laughter gone. Some approached, to ask questions, not to mock, but to understand. Mira answered patiently, sharing stories of human communities, survival, and the strength of family ties. Darren walked beside her silently. He had no words, yet his presence spoke volumes. Princess Elira watched him from the balcony above, realizing that she had never truly seen him before. Not just the soldier, but the symbol of a people whose strength was deeper than crowns or fleets. That night, Elira sat alone in her chamber, staring at the twin moons above the city. Mira's words echoed in her mind. Fathers teach sons, mothers guide daughters. Knowledge, courage, and love are stronger than any weapon. She pressed her hand against her chest. For the first time, she understood. Humans were not weak. They were not simple. They carried something powerful, something her empire had forgotten. And she knew deep inside that this revelation would change everything. The Sarathian capital glowed under the twin moons, the city alive with music, lights, and the soft hum of hover vehicles moving through the streets. The memory of the raid, the council, and Mira's father bomb speech lingered in the minds of the nobles. Change was quietly stirring. Princess Elira stood on her balcony looking down at the gardens below. Darren had returned to the guest hall, as calm and silent as ever, but she could no longer see him merely as a human soldier. She could see what Mira had said, strength in patience, courage, and family bonds. For days, she had thought about it, turning the ideas over in her mind. The laughter she had once used to mock him now seemed shallow and small. The quiet strength of Darren and the wisdom of his mother had forced her to see humans differently. Finally, she made her decision. That morning, The princess asked to meet Darren in the garden. The air was cool, filled with the scent of silver leaves and flowers that shimmered under the soft sunlight. Darren was already there, standing near the fountain, watching the reflection of the moon still lingering in the water. "Soldier," she called softly. Darren turned, bowing slightly. "Princess Aelira." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I was wrong to mock you, to laugh at your people. I believed humans were weak, but I see now. I see your strength." Darren's face remained calm. He said nothing. At first, only waiting for her to continue. "You stood quietly in my empire while others faltered," she continued. "You acted with courage when danger struck. And your mother, her words revealed a power I never understood before, the power of family, of love, of guidance. It is remarkable." Darren nodded slowly. "Strength comes in many forms, Princess. Some are shown in fleets and armies, others are quiet, passing from one generation to the next. Both are needed in this galaxy." Aelira smiled faintly, a smile of respect and humility. "I see that now. I want to learn more, to understand, and perhaps to cooperate. Your people have something my empire has forgotten." Word of the princess's acceptance spread quickly. The nobles, who had once laughed at the humans, now watched with curiosity and respect. They began asking questions, learning from Mira, and observing Darren's actions carefully. Some admitted privately that humans were not as weak as they had believed. In the palace, a grand meeting was arranged. Emperor Calorin, Princess Aelira, Mira, Darren, and the human envoys gathered with Sarathian leaders. The goal was to form a partnership, not one of dominance, but of mutual respect. Mira spoke first. "We come not to take, but to share. Our people bring knowledge, cooperation, and understanding. We ask only to be partners in the future of this galaxy." Darren added, "And we stand ready to act with courage when needed, to protect not only our people but the bonds that unite us. Strength is not in pride alone. It is in service, patience, and trust." Princess Aelira, standing beside her father, addressed the council. "I have learned much from these humans. Their strength is unlike any I have seen, not in fleets or weapons, but in heart, family, and courage. We must respect it, and in doing so, we may grow stronger ourselves." The nobles nodded. Some still whispered, but there was no laughter. Respect had replaced ridicule, and curiosity had replaced pride. In the days that followed, cooperation between humans and Sarathians grew. Humans shared techniques in agriculture, medicine, and star mapping. Sarathians shared knowledge of trade, diplomacy, and interstellar navigation. And all the while, Mira spoke of values, courage, and family bonds, teaching lessons that could not be learned from technology or wealth alone. Princess Aelira spent more time observing Darren. She watched how he interacted with other humans and Sarathians alike. He did not boast. He did not seek glory. He acted with calm, careful attention, ensuring that tasks were completed and people were safe. And in those quiet moments, Aelira realized she admired him, not as a soldier, but as a person who carried the strength of his people in everything he did. One evening, as the twin moons reflected on the palace fountains, Aelira approached Darren once more. "Soldier," she said softly. Darren turned, bowing slightly. Princess, I have learned much, she continued, not only about humans, but about what truly matters. Strength is not only in empires or weapons, it is in patience, courage, and the bonds we carry. You have shown me this. Darren inclined his head. I am glad you see it, Princess. It is never too late to learn. Elira smiled, the first true smile of humility she had given in days. No, it is never too late. And perhaps together, we can show our peoples a better way, one where respect and cooperation are as strong as fleets and armies. Darren gave a faint smile. That is a future worth working toward. From that day forward, the Sarathian capital changed quietly but surely. Nobles began to listen more than they boasted. Families were remembered in conversations and decisions, and humans, once mocked, were now respected as teachers, partners, and friends. Princess Elira continued to watch. Darren and his people. She had learned that true strength was not always obvious, and that courage could be quiet. She had learned that the bonds of family were a shield no army could break. And she had learned that humans, simple, patient, brave humans, could teach, even the proud Sarathians, something new. As the moons shone over the city, Darren, Mira, and the princess stood together in the gardens. They looked toward the stars, knowing that a future of unity, understanding, and respect awaited them. The empire was stronger, not because of weapons, but because of hearts, courage, and the quiet power of love and family. And for the first time, Princess Elira laughed. Not mockingly, but freely, a sound that carried hope for all who heard it. The human soldier had won her respect. His mother had revealed the secret of their strength. And the Sarathian Empire had learned a lesson it would never forget, that true power could come from love, patience, and the bonds that tied generations together. The galaxy, once full of doubt and pride, now had the chance to shine with cooperation, understanding, and hope.